That was the elevator. There is an easier way back to the internal staircase. It was connections between sub-levels. At one moment it will be far easier. There is a number of benches in many chambers of the museum, so there will be an additional price for taking pictures, so you can turn in the cameras, stay sharp. Please follow me to first chamber of the museum. Try to make a place for rest and be careful with the flashes. Me too, they let me go back to the surface maybe twice per year, so I'm not that used to the light. Seeing this small shaft here, it goes somewhere and then it's getting more complicated, but when we pass the next airlock, I think it will be easier to understand. I started to dig wells in this area looking for potential resources of water somewhere below the surface. But about 60-70 meters below. Imagine a situation and a real map of this area. Everything was here. Not exactly here, but had salt from walls and ceilings, mostly in terms of pickaxe and hammers, making area progressively bigger. And at point when it was big enough, they're starting to separate blocks of the size of a gun. Right here, we can see a simple machine called a hand cross. Reconstruction, of course, of like a environment, so maybe see, but you're adult people, ladies and gentlemen, so make the right decision. But it's okay to taste, it's just soul extraction of the ancient deposit of the past. But which is very interesting. Now, as I mentioned a moment ago, spaces of chambers are spaces that after exploitation of single blocks of salt. Corridors are circles had long time. And that's why you could find it on tables of European nobility and kings almost everywhere on the old continent. But have you ever looked at that? It counts as one picture, so I keep you in mind. Statues. Statues here, using the medieval divine protection that in this area was something far more dangerous subjects here. During the first 200 years of our history, we were in small complexes of chambers and corridors as connections between. And I'm talking about Kyrix United. And to be united easily by small things. That's lovely. So, for example, transportation of salt is very simple, 100 kilograms, or that few dozens of meters as dangerous maximum without making money. So it was very natural that about 500 years ago, the first horse was transported down here because best friends of humanity could find parts of a few gigantic blocks of salt in one morning. Or lots of wood. And then they're going back to the city for about 2 weeks in a simple form of a wooden elevator. There was always a miner standing on it. In the city, they were power movements of the machines that you want to talk about at a certain moment. But after that 2 weeks, rotation of very research and mine belongs in one light that was form of a tradition. There was special classes to miners, take care of the animals only, and their medical hospitals provided by the royal vet from Castle in Krakow, so some of the best quality. Do you have any powers with you? Because I don't have the light that I can see on all of the let's have a look. Provide seating, so those gears could change the right direction, vertical, and they were moving in space of shadow. Its gravity affects the water on the surface because it was situated vertically. Water in lakes run in simple methods of work by heavy pickaxe and hammers. None of these open spaces is natural, none of it was discovered by the miners. I forget about my first thought, and I thought in a lazy way. appreciate your efforts. That's always a good thing to do. Yes. Immortalize the story. As you remember, and it's very shallow depots. Something collapsed down here because of moving water. The sinkholes would start up here in the city and start going down here. The water was a few serious accidents. And the miners were getting some symbolic amount of pure salty powder, which these days, because we still have to deal with water, but with a bit more advanced technology. The first holy place we can discover on the way to the mine is simply called Holy Cross Chapel of the tour. But that's one of the reasons. 100 meters below the surface, dedicated to place that about the central space down part of the mine. This is about 700 years. Each single wall carving belongs to the staff who's keeping their lives station carving without the knowledge, experience, figuring out and by rushing to get the word and they could understand that they dedicated their lives to pieces of carpenter's art you can find in this part of the continent and for sure below the surface. But we have to use our imagination a little bit because we can see only small part of that chamber. That construction holds ceiling of an open to it, I think, so we can only imagine, but top of that staircase. But in the innovative century, people installed kingdom were betrayed by the last king who opened the door when these parts became Galicia, district of Austrian Empire, and Austrians took over administration over the mine, and I opened here an elite form of by their last king. Territory was given to union between Prussia, Russia and Austria. And we lost our home. Because of partition of Poland, we lost our home for 123 years. And it was difficult because that's one of the rules of war, ladies and gentlemen, so always remember that. When you conquer the territory, you force the assimilation on the conquered people, because if you give them new version of history, new identity, new values, they forget whom their ancestors were after a lifespan of generation of two. They stop fighting, and then you can pull their strings like marionettes. So there was a replacement of language in Poland. It was forbidden to teach about history of the country, about the language, about the culture, just to make people forget whom their ancestors were. For us, it was a period of uprisings, long uneven fight, and a lot of Polish blood was spilled. Not just so we could show that it's our home and it can be taken from us just like that. And in 1918, in times of Marshal Józef Piłsudski, often considered one of the greatest Polish national heroes, we had that brief moment of freedom called międzywojnie, between the wars. In 1918, the First World War ended, all the Europe was destroyed, all its culture was brutally killed, every single nation was defeated and there are no victors. But in that pile of ash, let's say, a number of nations who were parts of the empire saw the opportunity to break free from the chains, get independence back as all the empires started to collapse. And Poland was one of them. We got our independence, we had the territories stitched from free territories that had different currency, economy, traditions, language for such a long time, which was very difficult, but it was our freedom. 21 years of this. And we lost it on 1st September of 1939, and many of you are here because you arrived mostly to this museum of Auschwitz-Birkenau, so there is no need to tell you how many millions of people were slaughtered here like the animals because of the Soviet Union, because of Nazi Germans, and because of the very difficult story that was already written a long, long time before war even started. We were betrayed by our allies alone, and we were fighting, but of course it wasn't that possible. But the war ended at some point, and then we were handed to the communists to become a satellite country of such a regime that I'm not sure if we can all fully understand. But let's go to the next part of the exposition. There is already a group behind us. We'll give them that. Every single one of us has someone in a family who lost their life in concentration camp, to Gestapo forces, to Soviet Union soldiers, or to anyone else. Every single one of us is shaped by the war our ancestors had to witness in some way. It's a long chain of consequence and the psychology of nation that remembers only the suffering. And the problem is that we are raised on those stories. I am raised by people who remember most of the communism. They were raised by people who remember only the war. They lost their loved ones, they were shaped by it completely. So I'm also an effect on that in many ways, because people who lost their close ones in the past couldn't learn everything one needs to learn before raising his own family. So we are all lacking something in many ways. And suddenly, people started to forget about all of that, about events that happened a few decades before us, saying that Polish people are co-responsible for concentration camps because it was Polish land, so it's natural, isn't it? Or that communism is a fantastic idea for equality for everybody, not understanding that this regime took lives of dozens of millions of people. That stories are important because history of this sad country is full of patterns of rules of propaganda, rules of war, and not only many mechanisms of politics that are surrounding us on a daily basis, and we already forget about history that make circle constantly. The war on Ukraine and the land of our brothers and sisters didn't end it didn't start a year ago, but in 2014 during annexion of Crimea. But no one was paying a real attention there. They were paying attention for a couple of months, and then everyone forgot about it, just as about current war in many ways. And the European Union was buying the resources from Russians, selling the weapons. Economy was flowing because it always flows behind the theater of war. And in times when we jump from this corporation office back to home to go to sleep, to go back to corporation office, we don't have a time to think about it. And ignorance, ladies and gentlemen, is the environment of propaganda. In such a times, people so easily rely on knowledge of somebody else that they can be manipulated like puppets, just reading the headline of the article and believing everything without thinking about it. That's the biggest mistake of the humankind, ladies and gentlemen. We are shaped by those stories in some way, and we see, or at least I see, what's happening around us, and it's so sad that we live in such a way, letting everyone control us, telling us what is true, what is not, when it's only a matter of understanding a bit of physics, bit of chemistry, bit of history to be able to verify the knowledge. And that's the main lesson of today's tour, ladies and gentlemen. That knowledge is the key, always to change something on this another way. But it's important to understand. And I want you to think about it for at least a couple of minutes. And these are probably my last words. We have finished the interactive history lesson at this point, so thank you very much for listening, ladies and gentlemen. I know that the finishing chapter of that story was a bit difficult, but I just feel obliged. It's something very personal, and I hope you'll have some use from that opinion. And now let's have a break we all deserve. We are in the first chamber of main marketing complex, impressive 35 meters high chamber. A bit empty these days, but it's the first one of area you can walk through on your own for some 15 minutes, let's say. Basically, it's a way for one corridor that goes in that direction. There are chambers on the way through it. Last one is the meeting points, and we meet there on, let's say, 1:45. But it's an absolute deadline. So if you want to buy some souvenirs, I highly recommend to focus on it on the surface, because there is a main souvenir shop available there too. On the way you'll see a restaurant, you can go there, sit for a moment, have a cup of coffee, taste some Polish cuisine. Just remember that we meet in the last chamber, 1:45, and then we go straight to the lift. If you have any questions, I'll be roaming. But still, it's the better scenario, because the other way would be sent to that shopping center of the city